AI in Action, Halldale's podcast series, which looks at how civil aviation, military, and other safety-critical industries are adopting AI in training.
So, hello everyone. My name's Andy Fawkes, Special Correspondent at the Halldale Group, part of Montgomery Group, and we're here today to talk about APATS, and we'll explain what that means very shortly. I've got a real expert team here who will be attending APATS, which is coming up quite soon now, and we'll be speaking there, and they've got some really interesting topics that we're going to cover today. For those who don't know about APATS, it's the Asia Pacific Training Summit, and this year it's held in Bangkok. At the end of August, the beginning of September. You can find out more on our website. And it's really a summit that brings together industry experts from the airlines, manufacturers, and also regulators to promote safety and best practice in pilot, cabin crew and maintenance training and beyond, really. So today we're going to talk about, in a way that one of our speakers has come up with, bridging the gap. We're trying to bridge the gap between the sort of the competencies and the consistencies, and also look at the next generation of aviation training, which is obviously important to us all. So yes, it is talking about standardisation of training and competencies in the air and on the ground, and also how the instructors themselves are developed. And I think it's going to be of huge interest, not just in civil aviation, but also beyond. So without further ado, I just want to we'll introduce our speakers, and we'll briefly go around the table, and then we'll sort of dive into what you're going to talk about at APATS coming up soon. So first of all, can I just ask James to introduce himself and your position? Thank you.
Yeah, hello. Thank you, Andy. Now, I'm James Diato from the Philippines. So currently, I'm the head of training for Erlang International Aviation College. So it's one of the leading colleges here in the Philippines. So we cater for maintenance, we cater for pilotage. So yeah, what I'm trying to present, or what I'm going to present in APATS, would be how we could bridge the gap between the academy, which I'm hailing from, and to what the industry needs. And one factor in that would be the instructors. And that's what I'm trying to present, or what I'm going to present on APATS.
Okay, fantastic. So, and Nuwan.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nuwan Gunaratha. I'm the chief pilot of Sri Lankan Airlines Flight Training Center. So currently, I'm working as a instructor pilot as well on the Airbus A320 and A330. So my key topic at APATS 2026 is going to be standardizing instructor practices in pilot training. It's basically going to be a competency-based approach for instructor training to get a very good outcome out of it, which enhances the safety and generally the competency of all the pilots that they train.
Okay, fantastic. And Janani.
Yes, hi, my name is Jayani Senanayaka. I am the Marketing and Business Development Manager for Sri Lankan Aviation College, the training arm of Sri Lankan Airlines. At APATS, I'm going to be speaking about competency-based training, how we conduct aircraft maintenance training based on a competency-based model, and how we are going to be bridging the gap between competency and the next generation of aviation training. And we have a very unique way of approaching practical training, so that is exactly what I'm going to be talking at APATS this time.
And indeed, very soon again. So thank you. But maybe I'll start with James then. So would you like to just go into a bit more detail about your talk and what you're going to cover at APATS?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Given that I'm currently the head of training for the maintenance school for the college, so my focus for this would be for the technical instructors, for those who teach, or for those who train upcoming mechanics for the aviation industry. So generally, regardless if it's going to be a smaller aircraft or A320, for example. So, however, the instructors indeed needs to be trained for this kind of training that they're going to give the students. So one factor in that is yung competency-based training, okay? where instructor needs to know the objective of the competency-based training. So many instructors right now, generally, when you talk about competency-based training, they have a bit of blur on what this means and what objective that you're going to follow, or what goal that you're going to follow for the students to gain the proper skills they need for the industry. So actually, one of my colleagues actually around this area, around the Philippines, uh, they said that the students, the learners, that the upcoming generations for the industry really lack some competency in terms of specific aircraft types. So I cannot really argue with that. However, um, based on studies that I have made, based on interviews and researchers that I have made, there are factors that really contribute to this lack in this competency. Okay. One factor is that students are limited, schools are limited to what the local authority is requiring them to learn. So they are contained in that specific area. They're contained or they're limited in this part, in which as the college or as the academy, okay, they want to give the students more. However, they are limited to this because the authority is only requiring this. So anyway, that's part of the presentation that I'm going to be making for APATS.
And is that because the syllabus of schools say is not doesn't meet your needs? Is that what you're saying, really? That people
Not really, not really. The syllabus is really based on the needs. However, the needs are expanding. So, for example, more airlines are using Airbus 320s and such. Okay, and the syllabus for most of the countries, not only in the Philippines, are limited to the small aircrafts, the general aviation aircraft, which they need to improve. Okay? But also
Okay.
the instructors need to improve to meet those standards.
Right. A new one. Could you? Thank you very much, James. New one. Could you talk about what are you going to talk about at APATS?
It's mainly about the standardization of instructors. How I always like to look at it is, if you're a pilot and you've been scheduled to do a check with a certain individual instructor, if the first question that comes to your head is, who is my instructor going to be? That means the instructors are not standardized, because it's even if the biggest airlines in the world, this is a question. So what I believe is at this juncture that we cannot really achieve 100% instructor standardization. It's at the moment, with the resources we have and the methods we use, it's very difficult. So where I come from is an airline with a 46 years of training background. So the issues that we face is sometimes the instructors, senior instructors who are like the pillars of the system, they are not from the competency-based era. So they do have to unlearn a lot of things to embrace competency-based teaching. And especially with the age and the amount of experience that they have on the conventional training, it's a very difficult thing to do. And the downside is, these are the same instructors that who are going to train the next generation of instructors, right? So if you have not embraced the logic and the theory of competency-based training, then it's instructor standardization of the next generation will also going to get hampered. So what we have done is, we have done mainly two things. One is for ab initio training, for their certain different exercises that they have been during their simulator phase. Each exercise, we have given our instructors a separate guide that explains them, for this particular exercise, these are the competencies that you should be measuring. So that way, if an instructor is doing an ab initio course maybe once, twice, thrice, he will eventually get the logic, the basics of competency-based training, and eventually there will be a standard way of teaching all ab initio courses. So rather than handing over an instructor a worksheet that he needs to tick, we do have gone the extra step of giving them a instructor guide for the session. And at Sri Lankan Airlines, we have recently started a process where something called the Airline Readiness Program, where general aviation student pilots are trained by us about the competencies and including the instructors. Because otherwise it's then the product that we get into the airline do have an idea of what is competency-based training and checking is. So we are working on that, and as well as these continuous workshops for especially new instructors to maintain the competency-based approach towards training is vital. And the lastly I would like to say is the education system in this part of the world is such that it does not encourage not all the time, but sadly in some instances, it does not encourage for students to speak up, point out things, talk back at the captain or the teacher, right? That is not encouraged. So, and we expect the same thing when that student moves from the classroom environment to the cockpit. So it takes years for them to embrace this unless we train them this at the very beginning. So that is what I'm going to talk about.
Absolutely fascinating. Yeah, really great. Thank you. And Jayani, would you what are you going to be talking about today, Pats, please?
Okay, so I'm going to be taking a focus on aircraft maintenance training, and it's basically going to be about bridging the gap between the classroom and operations, because after all, we are going to be training professionals, and that's where we have to address. So aircraft are maintained by people making hundreds of judgment calls every single day. And competency-based training is all about ensuring that those decisions are safe, consistent, and repeatable. And after all, it is suitable for a commercial airline, because aircraft are becoming increasingly sophisticated, and human factors are one of aviation's biggest safety challenges. And industry needs technicians who can think, not simply remember. So we are not training students to pass examinations at the college. We are training professionals who can one day make decisions that determine whether an aircraft departs safely and whether the lives on board of that aircraft are safe. And we take an approach of learning through the senses. It's not basically based on books or PowerPoint presentations, because humans remember experiences rather than PowerPoint slides. And reading about a tire defect and physically running your hands across a damaged tire are completely different learning experiences. I think you would agree. So yeah. At the college, we let the students touch, measure, compare, and debate among themselves, and then justify rather than simply memorize what they are being told. And competency-based training is also about developing that sense of intuition and that sense of judgment. So it's not simply about, is this damaged? It's about, is this damage still within allowable limits? Because we are working with commercial airlines, and it is also about balancing the commercial and safety. Yes, safety is paramount, but we do need to think about other factors as well. So that distinction is exactly what licensed engineers do every day. So we are teaching judgment, not guesswork. It is a calculated judgment that the students will be taking on the floor. It is never guesswork. And also, we are encouraging students to repeatedly reference to the aircraft maintenance manuals instead of just relying on memory. And that is very, very important, because these manuals are updated constantly. And this practice ensures that most updated aircraft maintenance manuals are referred to at any given time. Having said that, we are also basically teaching our students to interpret the manual the correct way. And that is something that you do by practice alone. So I think that is the gist of my presentation that I will be doing at APATS.
I think I heard you say you're training people to think, not to remember. Did I remember that correctly?
Yes. Well, think about the things that they remember actually, and always refer back to the manuals because that is very important. The updates come in very regularly, so it's important for them to refer back to the manuals, and that is a professional practice that we try to inculcate among the students rather than just relying solely on the memory.
I thought it was very good. I thought that was excellent way of putting it. Thank you so much, all three of you. Absolutely brilliant. This is a general question. What for our listeners? What are the main drivers for a more competence-based approach? That could be anyone who wants to step in. Is it regulation? Is it economics? Is it just a better way of training?
Well, maybe I could go first.
Yeah, James. Yeah.
Actually, there are so many factors in terms of this. One is regulation, as you stated, as part of what I have said earlier. That's one. Another factor is the instructors involved. So one principle that many are thinking is the older the instructor, the better education that we would have. However, the generation that we have is, or in one way, there are so many generations right now. Like there are millennials, there are Gen Z, there are so many generations, and many of those instructors from before are not able to adapt to this kind of generations. So one factor is we could develop and standardize our new instructors to better or to be more capable of handling this ever-changing, ever-variable number of generations of students that we have right now. So also the access. One factor or another factor is the access of our students to these particularly complicated aircraft and its systems. So, well, for my opinion, those are the factors that could affect the competency-based training. How about you, Nuwan?
Yes, I definitely agree with you regarding the regulation. Then I would like to add a couple of things to that. One would be now with this new competency-based training movement, rather than training individuals to handle a particular failure, we are training individuals to handle any failure because the aircrafts are now very robust and they are very reliable. But when things go wrong, it's not something that is crystal clear written in the book. So how they approach that problem, it's very critical, which is where your competencies come into play, which we call in this evidence-based training world something called a black swan event, right? So it's not a very common thing, but if it does happen, it can have disastrous effects if not handled well. If you really look into the aviation accident within the past decades or so, none of these things are very crystal clear incidents, right? You might think this should not have been ended up in a crash, but where a competent pilot would start from the briefing center itself, he would see the threats and mitigation acts. So that is where we should be going. So one thing I would like to add for James is the preparing crews for black swan events where they are trained to handle any failure rather than a particular failure. So that is where competency-based training is important.
So is it like the human, in a way, having to deal with events that no one's ever come across before, in a way, that is how do you have a mind that can deal with that?
Exactly. And one good example would be the Hudson River incident, right? So never happened. Even the probabilities that they compute certain crashes, if this could happen at this particular, maybe 1 in trillion flights, but it did happen, right? So what saved the day was the competency-based training and the way they approach the problem.
Yeah, well, we need to learn from I think situations like that. So in a way, I mean, some of these are very much people skills, aren't they, as well? That
Yes.
you know, the instructor needs a sort of people skills and competence to deal with people of different generations. And I guess in emergency situations, it's nearly always you're with someone else. So how do you work with someone else when you think something's going wrong? Is any Durrani, is there any anything you'd like to add to that point about?
Well, I agree. I agree wholeheartedly with Nuan and James. I mean, aviation is all about expecting the unexpected. So if your training is competency based, then you would know what exactly to do because you are thinking on your feet. You are not memorizing. That brings me to my earlier point about not memorizing. It's about how to apply the learning. I'm a huge believer in knowing the rules if you want to break the rules or bend the rules. So you are learning what you have to learn. But then again, when it comes to the actual situation, you basically apply the learnings to fashion your way around the situation to suit it best. And also a point that James mentioned about the new generation. We are dealing with so many generations right now, and we have to adapt to all of their learning styles. And we are living in an age where, you know, young people can gain information very instantly through TikToks and YouTube and all of those things. But I think when it comes to aviation, you need patience, you need discipline, you need all of those slow learning skills that is required to save a life or to do a proper job. So I think that is where competency-based training comes in handy, because we are not sitting them in a classroom telling them, okay, you should learn this. We are giving them practical exercises. We are employing them in tasks that train them discipline and slow thinking. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, fantastic. Is there any other points anyone would like to raise on that? Otherwise, I mean, maybe I'm showing my ignorance. Is there some efforts to standardize competencies in some of these areas? So that you could go from one airline to the next, or one ground crew to the next, and it wouldn't be a huge change.
Actually, in terms of standardization of our instructors, again, as Nuwan said earlier, we cannot really standardize it 100%. There must be at least some margin of error for this standardization. However, to achieve competencies that we have or standardize the competency that we need, okay, for the new generations of mechanics, new generations of pilots, or new generation of cabin crew members. Actually, I think what we need is the industry itself to state what they need. Okay. Well, currently the industry have so many standards that they want to require all of these new airmen or these new crew members, new mechanics, or new pilots. Okay. In a way, their standards are different from everyone. One airlines have this standard, the other one have this standard. So as we produce new crews, new mechanics, or new pilots, we don't have any standard to follow that would benefit all of them actually. So the best way that we could do is to develop these instructors to be adaptable to these changes, to these new requirements, to these various requirements that the industry and its airlines have.
Are there good examples of where instructors have been able to change? And I'm someone of an older generation myself. I like new things. I'm surprised that older people don't want to change. But is there any any of you really? How would you suggest that instructors, whatever age they are, in fact, they encourage them to perhaps change from the way they were trained?
Andy, I would like to answer your question regarding that.
Yeah, go. Yeah.
So regardless of the age, well, I'm not saying that all instructors are lesser than the new ones. Actually, they're great. They have so many knowledge in their heads, So it's actually good. However, they need to share those knowledge. Many of the old instructors, they like to contain it to themselves. So that's not good. So we need to develop these new instructors. We like those old instructors to help us develop these new instructors as well.
Any other views on instructors?
As James said, that I think the training department, the head of trainings, the chief pilots, have a very delicate task of balancing the older generation of instructors and the new generation of instructors. So where none of the teams will feel anything less than the other, but they will become a value addition to each other. So that is something you have to be a little crafty when you do. So when you do that, what will happen is if you, let's say you have 10 senior instructors bit reluctant to change, if you manage to get to about 5 of them and change them, the other 5 has no option but to change, right? So that 5, the training manager, the head of training has to pick which 5 that's going to be. Then they realize, okay, this is how we need to change. And for me, basically what I used to tell them is, we have been flying the Airbus A320 and the A330 from early 1990s. So the instructors who are teaching these aircrafts are very, very well experienced. I always ask them the question, what if we do get a 777 tomorrow? Are you going to say, I don't know that aircraft, so I don't want to be an instructor anymore, you're going to walk off? Or are you going to study the plane, change the way you teach, change the systems that you change, the way you teach the systems, everything, and adjust? The answer is, I'm going to adjust to the 777. So think about it this way. I know you have lots of baggage from the older generation of 320, 330 teaching, but time to let go and change. And as a matter of fact, it took us some time. Now, we started off evidence-based training in 2018. And actually, to tell the truth, we had a tough time for the first 2 years. It was very difficult. Constant monitoring was required. But eventually we managed to change the system. Then, as Andy said, is it the same between the other airlines? During a period where my airline had very limited number of flights, we lost a lot of our crew to key Middle Eastern airlines. And the feedback I got from them was that the evidence-based training and the competency-based training, which we did in our organization, really helped them to move from this company to the other one because they also been doing the same thing. The only thing that they said was, in those airlines, when they're handling a problem, they do talk a lot. Their briefings are extremely long, extensive. So when I thought about it, I realized that at Sri Lankan Airlines, it's 99.9% of the cadre are locals. But when you're working for a multinational company, you better make sure that you're, again, in the communication part of the competency. Whatever you say, your hand gestures to your, whatever the local language you use sometimes in the flight deck, they understand. But when you are in a different setup with one guy is from Australia and the other guy is from Japan, they need to come into the same page before they execute a task. Hence, they encourage that. But in our organization, we don't go over and beyond when it comes to the communication part, because generally people do understand what you mean by a couple of words when you speak, That's what I took from that.
That's a fascinating insight, and a sort of need for diversity inclusion on the flight deck, and that's a very powerful point. Gianni, what's your thoughts on the instructor side and how to keep them where you want them to be, so to speak?
Sure. Yes, and your question was on standardizing the practices among the airlines. I think we have, especially in this part of the world, when it comes to the instructors, we have a challenge in standardizing practices among the instructors of the same airline. Like both James and Nuan highlighted, the old generation seems to be quite set in their ways of instructing, and this is human nature, I would suppose. We are very slow to embrace new technology, new methods of teaching, so it takes a bit of encouraging. And I think some of it can be addressed through standardizing instructor methodology as well, where if one instructor comes to the class today and then another one takes the same class tomorrow, the students should not feel the difference. It should be a seamless integration. So I think by certain practices, like for example, at the college, we have this practice where students are given task cards when they are going into practical training, and practical trainers change every day. So how do you keep the students from feeling that difference from one instructor to another? The students have a task card which they mark, and then the instructors have an instructor mastercard which they refer to when they interact with the students, so that when at the end of the day, today's training is not different than tomorrow's training, because the students will be getting the same content, same ideas, and the same base of knowledge as yesterday as tomorrow. So I'm pretty sure that there are other ways of standardizing these practices, but I'm not entirely sure how we can do that among airlines. But within the same airline, yes, definitely we can do that.
Very interesting. Talking about sort of new entrants and the people joining and the trainees, what are your I mean, it's often, I've heard it quite a few times about the young generation. And of course, that young generation is now the older generation, about how they're different. But what would you say, sort of brief, simply, are their needs different from the generation, the older generation? Is anything dramatic changing?
I'll
with the
go first
influence
on
of
this one.
Go for it.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, their attention spans have drastically reduced. They are impatient all the time. You should just walk into a classroom and you see all kinds of things happening, rather than sitting there and listening to the instructor. So this is one of the reasons that we have come up with this competency-based training model that we have, which forces them into practical activities, that forces them to develop the skills rather than keeping them still. So like I mentioned earlier, it's an age where information is gained very quickly. So these students of nowadays, they really don't have the patience to sit and listen to an instructor, because we as a generation, as the older generation, I consider ourselves the older generation, by the way, we are used to knowing where the knowledge comes from and where it stems from, why a certain thing is as it is. But nowadays, the students have no patience of listening to why and the how and the like that kind of knowledge. They really don't have the patience. They just want to learn how to do a certain thing and get away with it. So that is exactly why we have developed this methodology of getting the students to do certain tasks and intuitively know what should be done and what shouldn't be done. So that's my take on it.
Any other views on that? Points?
Well, Andy, I have something else, maybe a bit controversial as well. I'll give it a go anyway. Let's take the aircrafts that we fly today, the A320, the A330 for my airline, designed in 1980s, right? So the books, the manuals, the procedures are written in that era, right? And now we're trying to get new generation to learn this aircraft in the way that one would learn this in 1990. And they will struggle. Now, Airbus memory items for our pilots remain like this for the last 3 decades or so. So the younger generation, they're not used to it. So they find it very difficult because certain things in this business you have to by heart and study. And it's simply because that aircraft was designed in an era like that, right? So maybe in 2050, you have a very crucial memory item that you have to execute as a pilot. All you have to do is press a button, the memory item will pop up in front of you in the screen. So you just follow it. But now it's not the case. So in an era where students are encouraged not to study, not to by heart, and try and analyze, then you are asking something different, because simply the machine belongs to 1980s. If you want to fly, if you want to go to moon, you have to study the shuttle. and that was built in 1950s, right? If you don't study it, you're not going to go to moon. So I see there is a gap between the machine and the era that we are teaching the machine to. The second thing is, as Jan said, the attention span is bit low and they get bored very fast. If you look at an airline career, you work as a first officer and you work your way up to captain. In our part of the world, you can become a captain in about 6 to 7 years as a first officer. So you're looking at 25 years of your career as a captain. And if you're from that generation, you're going to be doing the same thing for 2.5 decades. And they do get bored. When you get bored, you lose your discipline and you don't study. Your attention wanders all over the place. And until you get a wake-up call on your next recurrent or some check that you do. So that is something, the self-motivation, I would use the word, is very low in the new generation, because as what I believe is, back in the day, flying was a inspiring thing that one had in his soul. Now it's not the case. So that's fine. But the issue is, when it comes to working in an airline environment, you have to keep yourself self-motivated to go on track. And the new generation will find it very difficult.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic insight. Thank you. I was very quiet. I mean, that was all really powerful. I'm not quite sure what the answer is, but sort of taking away mobile devices and AI from everyone and putting them in simulators. I don't know. We're sort of coming to an end a bit. James, would you like to comment on that point about the training, the sort of next generation?
As I've said a while ago, Andy, the generation right now, they're, as Jayani also said, their attention span is quite short. They tend to be bored and out of motivation. So, as in regards, in addition to this, one factor that our company is also doing in regards to this is, we have the instructors better themselves based on the knowledge of our elder instructors, our seasoned instructors. So I have tried to reposition many instructors, the older instructors. I try to reposition them to lead the new instructors, as many of the students right now, they are more fond of the new instructors, those generations that they have been close to, instead of the instructors that we had. In which case, we have lost that sense, as Nuwan said, the sense of motivation, from our students. So I don't want that going too far or being blown away. So one factor to keep them motivated is to improve the instructors, their skill set, based on their empathy and based also from the knowledge that they could gain from our seasoned instructors or older instructors.
Excellent. Inspiring instructors we need
Yeah.
to, and yeah, fantastic. Well, time always flies by in these events, but I'm for myself, I'm more for the military side, but I've found this is really absolutely fascinating, and I think it bodes well for APATS and the discussions there. You know, we've covered issues of the motivations of the next generation, about how to get instructors to partly to be more standardized, but partly to adjust just to the new world, so to speak. So thank you so much, everyone. Giovanni, sorry, Nuwan and James. If there was any other final points, we'll take them. But otherwise, I think we'll look forward to seeing you at APATS, which is the 31st of August, 2nd of September. I think I've got that right. So in Bangkok. So we'll leave the details on the website here. So thank you all so much for your time today. It's been absolutely amazing. Thank you very much. Goodbye.